In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, may the blessings of Allah be upon His Messenger Muhammad. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished gathering, all the participants and the followers through the social media, may the blessings of God be upon you all. I would like to welcome you to the 12th Annual Gulf Studies Forum, which was launched by the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies in 2014 and has become ever since a platform for all the researchers and those who are interested in the Gulf country affairs in different aspects. This year's forum will focus on two tracks. The first on Arab Gulf states and transformations in the Arab Mashreq, the other the social media in the Gulf, the construction of the political and civil sphere. This forum will be held at a time when the region is going through critical changes and transformations, and new landscape is being formed, and the different activities are taking place. The Al-Aqsa flood in October 2023 and what was followed by a genocidal war on Gaza has opened a new chapter in the history of the modern Middle East where unprecedented redistribution of the political impact and the war has expanded to Iran, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. And then there was a pivotal change when a year ago from now the Assad regime in Syria had fallen and raising many questions about the future of that country. These transformations were not confined to the Gulf states, and the Gulf states themselves found themselves once again having to cope with the repercussions of these fundamental transformations in the region. Qatar has played a leading role in negotiating a truce in the Israeli war on Gaza. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has provided an alternative Arab vision to expelling the population of Gaza, and its relations with Lebanon and Iraq had also gone through very critical changes. The role of the Gulf states at the political level, humanitarian, and mediation levels have been both impacted by the current situation and themselves impacted these transformations. Therefore, the 12th forum, annual forum, offers a new reading, a new perspective on the roles and perspectives, the interests, and the mutual exchanges and the mutual impact. And the Gulf countries, which are themselves are going through a test of maintaining their equilibrium and balance, where everything else around it is going through these critical changes. Faced with this situation, we can see another no less important change, and that is the social media and the digital transformation, which has not just become a technical change, it has become a construction of the political and civil sphere and a determinant of the relationship of the citizen with the governments, and the Gulf countries have become one of the highest areas in the world in the intensity of using social media, and not through consumption, but through ownership also of, and also raising the level of influence, whereby influencers have gained more importance, and the social media sphere has are providing alternative spaces now, and those who are engaged in it are deconstructing its whole structure, and so much so that questions are being asked: are we faced with a new reality altogether? And these new questions are pertinent now regarding identity, law, represent, representation, political representation, democratic change. So we are not facing with just one change. In fact, we are faced with two deep changes, a political one and a social digital one, which is forming or reforming the societies in the Gulf itself. And it's the digitalization is becoming a strong factor in both understanding this change and effecting it. We look forward to the deliberations of this forum and hope that it will provide an opportunity for us to contribute to building knowledge which is compatible to the responsibilities of the Gulf countries, both in the near future and in the distant future too. Now we move to the first session, which will be under the title of Arab Mashreq Transformations and the Gulf States Engagement and Challenges. This is a plenary session, and after that we will move into the two tracks. I invite Dr. Marwan Qablan to chair this session. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah, Dr. Asad, and Dr. Khalid Khalifi. Please come to the podium. May the blessings of God be upon you all. I renew our welcome of all our guests and participants. We start this forum with the first session on the Arab Mashreq transformations and the Gulf states. I remind you exactly a, a year ago we uh, uh, we were here, and during the uh, this forum, I think it was the first day or second day, it was at an earlier time when Aleppo fell into the hands of the Syrian opposition. Then that was followed by Damascus and the entire regime change. In anyway, as Dr. Alanoud said, the area's landscape is totally different than how it was last year. Now, with the fall of the Assad regime in Syria and the changes, many political alliances change, and also the Hayat Tahrir al-Shams conquering of Damascus was a seismic event no less important than what happened in Afghanistan when Taliban entered Kabul, and I think this expresses a change of the scene that the Islamic trend is coming back strongly. But on the other hand, Israel, who tried desperately to impose its will on Gaza, Lebanon, or Iran, despite the military confrontations, Israel has failed in imposing its will, and we can deduct from all of that and what happened throughout the last 2 years that this area has strong tendencies to resist any attempt to impose hegemony on it. And even Israel, with its enormous military superiority, could not impose its will either. And we will be discussing in this session a number of questions pertaining to the ability of the Gulf states to seize the moment, to invest politically, and to rearrange the area in a way which can serve the interests of the Gulf countries and the Arab world at large. And we saw a rise in the role by uh, Gulf countries, although the rivalry between the Gulf countries is also apparent. We can see that in Yemen and in the Sudan is abundantly clear. And these questions and others are becoming even more permanent as to how we can deal with these risks and opportunities. Should we be dealing with them in the same old traditional way, or are the Gulf countries seizing the moment, or are they just chasing events as they have been for a long time, and the rivalry between them is still strong enough? Are Gulf countries prepared for any future developments, any explosion in the situation? And we can start with this session with three distinguished researchers. We start with Dr. Abdullah Al-Shaiji. In few words, is a professor at Kuwait University of International Relations, and he got his PhD from Austin University in Texas. He was the head of the political studies department at Kuwait University. He has a number of titles to his name on the Gulf Cooperation Council's Crisis, Roots, Causes, Overturn, and also the prospects and U.S. presidents' doctrines from George Washington to George Bush. We have 15 minutes to each speaker, then we have a discussion. Thank you, Dr. Marwan. Good morning to you all. I'm very happy once again to take part with our colleagues and distinguished guests, and once again thank the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies for continually holding this important forum. And this is what we've been looking forward to in the Gulf area for many years, to face up to the challenges and developments in an area where, by the admission of many, has become the heart of the Arab world. And even before the so called Arab Spring, I noticed that there was a fundamental change in the soft power of the Arab Gulf countries to lead the Arab system, and this has been proven time and again when we talk about the Arab order which was no longer able to deal with the challenges, and now these countries are fast approaching what we can call a middle power. And when the Gulf crisis came in 2017 to 2021, this has negatively impacted the rise the Arab Gulf countries were witnessing. And but after the reconciliation in the Al-Ula summit, we saw a gradual return to the role of the Gulf countries to play the same role again. And we noticed that the central powers, the traditional Arab powers, are no longer leading, like Egypt is looking inwards because of the revolution and what happened in the last decade. Syria also was in a difficult situation when the revolution was militarized and the former regimes involving Russia and Iran and others. Iraq was outside the context completely since the invasion of Kuwait, the sanctions regime, and the fall of the Saddam Hussein regime. The only constant variant was the United States, which, if it did or didn't do anything, even some blunders, as they're called, we end up paying the price. The Al Aqsa flood came at a very critical stage. We call it the factor which revealed and exposed the weaknesses of the Arab regime. Gaza was being subjected to genocide. The first documented video with the sound and picture and image, audio, visually, and we studied that many years ago. We studied in the United States, the country which claims that it supports human rights and the civilized values. Suddenly, America has fallen completely as it has done previously in Abu Ghraib in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, Bagram, and other places. But Gaza has proven three things, in fact. Number one, that the Arab order cannot deter or face up to or avoid the collectively the dangers that threaten its parts individually. And secondly, that Arab countries will be left alone in times of crisis. We remember the Syrians chanting, "We have no one to turn to but except you, God." And the Gazan people said the same. When, and the entire Arab order decided in a summit meeting, an Arab Islamic summit meeting, they called for breaking the siege, but ultimately not a single loaf of bread or a bottle of water could be sent into Gaza against Israel's will. So therefore, we realize that despite the Israel having the kind of right-wing government which has been very strategic in its positions, and despite the September resolution to call for an alternative to the American Zionist position, which is playing this role in the entire regime. The second point we can talk about that there are changes in the regional regime and towards multilateralism. We now find four prominent states in the region. We have Israel, the country of occupation, which violates international law and weakens the Arab order, and it's acting as the agent that can protect order and security on behalf of the United States when the American role itself is on the retreat. When I prepared this paper, the new American national strategy, which was issued about a week ago, was issued then. It really had this paper or this doctrine. I had to make some changes to my own paper now because this is a very dangerous strategy and it weakens America's allies in the region tremendously and it completely buries once and for all, and this will be a huge burden on the Gulf countries and the American allies in Europe, how to deal with threats at a time when threats are increasing all the time. And Gulf countries, and especially Qatar, as we saw for the first time, pays the price for what's happening in Gaza and how Israel's recklessness, which is not only threatening the security of the neighboring countries in Palestine, Jerusalem, Lebanon, Syria, it has reached Yemen and Qatar for that matter. And this is because of Qatar's role. And now the American military presence in Qatar has no longer become a source for protection. It has become a burden now because at the time of need it did not do. And Trump could have stopped Israel from attacking Doha. And what he said was totally refuted, and he's because Israel can never do such a thing without America's knowledge. Although he said that 10 minutes into the strike, he informed Qatar and that Israel was about to attack Hamas's offices where they were meeting to discuss Trump's own offer of peace. So this was a direct attack on Qatar's direct role in diplomacy. Iran, for the first time, attacked a Gulf country. So the Gulf countries have become a frontline countries in the confrontation. We are no longer were in the countries in the vicinity, but we were in the direct line of fire as Al-Udeid air base was attacked. Similarly to Ain al-Assad base in Anbar province in Iraq, as when Trump ordered the killing of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian military commander. But of course, the Iranian attack on the American base in Iraq was with prior coordination with the Americans. But this attack in last June has placed the Gulf countries in the heart of the confrontation. This change is not new, however, and I remind you that in September 2019, when the Aramco installations in the eastern province in Bgag and Khrais were attacked, and the FBI proved later on that it was done through Iranian weapons and they hit their targets with a very high level of accuracy. The Houthis claimed that they carried out the attack. Trump did not because he said that happened in Saudi Arabia, not in the United States. And that was a decisive moment to make everyone realize that you can no longer rely on Trump, although the visit by Trump in May 2017 and the summit meetings he held with Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, and the Arab Muslim countries, and he was bragging about how he closely coordinated and cooperated with the Gulf countries. But in my podcast about a year and a half ago, and I got 6 million views, I said that Trump personally and America as a country cannot be relied on because he has no strategy, he has no plans, despite his knowledge that there is a need for security in the region if he wants all this investment in the region. And the second time when Qatar was attacked, of course, this was the first time a Gulf capital was attacked, not just any Gulf capital, but an important party to mediation and ending the war in Gaza and getting the hostages released. And this is part and parcel of Qatar's mediation, diplomacy, and conflict resolution, and play an essential role in adding to the weight of Arab Gulf countries. Despite all of that, it, say for the last 30 years that American presence in the Gulf is not permanent, and in Glenn Snyder's Security Dilemma talks about that a small ally or a weak ally in a big or strong ally has two complexes. When the weak party will feel that they're following the strong ally without having a sentimental or abandonment, a feeling of abandonment to a more important, a stronger ally. And this from 2019 has been increasing this view. And after the Israeli attack on Qatar, I think this will make Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, and Israel, and Pakistan also. And it's noticeable that the Gulf countries are hedging our bets now for the first time. A week after Qatar's attack, Saudi Arabia and signed an agreement with nuclear Pakistan, and this is an unprecedented thing. They signed a security cooperation. This was the first time it's done with an ally outside the Gulf, and this reminds us of the Sunni alliance to face the Shiite crescent when the Jordanian King Abdullah talked about a decade and a half ago to form some sort of regional alliances against Iran, because we have fundamental problem in the Gulf, and that is we don't have indigenous balance of power. We do not have an indigenous balance of power which can counteract, deter, and protect against in any regional order which does not have such a balance of power will always be susceptible to attacks. Iraq was threatening the security of the Gulf. Your 15 minutes are over. I will finish anyway. I'm not reading the paper, but the important point is we in the GCC should get our act together. There are major changes on the way. If you read my article tomorrow in the Sharq newspaper and SSS 2025, the American National Security Strategy, this is We are on our own. This is what I was warning against. And we published this study at Kuwait University. I leave it with Dr. Marwan, warning against this American National Strategy 2025. And we said the impact of uh, American downgrading of Middle East. We are not going to be with you. You have to be on your own. We will be there to help, but will not be there with you like Carter's principle 1980. This is a study with Dr. Naufa Al-Jassar. She was my student, now she is my colleague, and we have Dr. Yaqub. He is the director of the center. I will wrap up. President Carter, 1980, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan on the 27th of December 1979, Carter announced the Carter Declaration of Principle when he declared important thing before the Congress, 1980, that the Gulf region is a vital interest region for the American national interest, for energy, trade, etc. Secondly, and this is more important, that the United States will resist any outside power, in brackets the Soviet Union, with all necessary means. And Brzezinski, the national security advisor, including, he added the phrase, including military force. This is why America entered the region, and Reagan protected the Kuwaiti oil tankers, and Bush Sr. liberated Kuwait with another 33 countries. All of that under the Carter Principle. Trump is saying the Carter Principle is dead and buried. Although the region is even more volatile. For this reason, we are in a bigger dilemma, in a bigger predicament, and we have to meet, and the GCC ministers of defense should meet urgently and coordinate to discuss the 5 points. I don't have time to go through, but unfortunately we are not until now able to form one project. For this reason, we are required more than any time. We are playing in extra time now, and we have to deal with America, which sees the Monroe. Trump is going back 200 years, that the American backyard is more important, and we see how he's going to launch maybe even a land attack on Venezuela, even against the law, and also he wants to contain China's ascendance and to contain Russia. Russia is happy with this, but Trump is blaming the victims, the Europeans. I thank you, but
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah, for this intervention that was entitled Repercussions of Al-Aqsa Flood and Transformations in the Arab Mashreq for the GCC states. I move on to Dr. Asad Saleh Al-Shamlan, And Dr. Asad is a professor of political science and head of the European Studies Center at the Prince Saud Al Faisal Institute for Diplomatic Studies. He holds a PhD and MA in political science from the University of Exeter in the UK and master's from the same university. He is a member of the International Political Science Associations. He has published many publications in political discourse, including From Ideology to Discourse, a study of the post structural approach to the concept of political discourse 2020. Dr. Asad has an intervention entitled GCC State and Mashreq Transformations Determinants of Engagement and Response. Please go ahead. Good morning, everyone. First, thank you very much to the organizers of this distinguished forum for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak to you. My topic in reality is not or does not start with GCC's relations with the Arab Mashriq. This topic is within a wider context or framework, and I believe it is time to think about that. If this era has any characteristics, the main characteristic is to revise things. We need to revise many things at many levels, philosophical, in AI. AI has created so many new convictions, but also at the level of the geopolitical issues. There's the European American relations, and I'm concerned with one of these convictions, as something that was reaffirmed by the latest events. A question about GCC. Where is it going? And what I'm concerned with here is the issue of the GCC's relation with the Arab Mashriq from the perspective of the future, with the issue of the future. So, what is imposed by the future to the GCC countries and their relations with the Arab Mashriq? I sent the summary of my research paper, and I thank my colleagues who have summarized my summary and perhaps it is not how I would have written it or summarized it, but this happens quite often in editing. You need to omit some things and summarize some things, and I understand that. And I appreciate it, and I appreciate that you wanted to protect me from the attendees or some of the attendees here, but I am certain that I am among friends and loved ones. I do not need protection. So it is. This is a two-page paper. I will read it, and perhaps I will stop at certain points in it, and I will take the same time that was taken by Dr. Abdullah, which is around 40 minutes. So let's start. GCC countries and the Mashreq, Arab Mashreq, and an outlook of the future as we can see today. This reading, I will read it. I don't like reading, but I have to. And I hope we can have a more conversational session about it. So, this reading starts from a strategic examination on the need of Arab countries for a new regional rhythm that builds on what was achieved by the GCC since its birth, but it pushes towards an integral transformation. And by integration, I mean integration of roles. And perhaps we could miss the equivalent synonym in Arabic, but it is an integral and integration. When we say integration, an integration complementarity of quality that is extensive and has a framework of a long-term vision, certain timings, with the objective of having an in-depth integration with multiple facets and levels. I believe this is the goal for many pathways and routes of regional integration. When I hear about trains being established, roads being built, I see them and I believe this we need to be more aware to push towards this integration. This report is based on a hypothesis that is easily proven and that says that without integration, without deep regional integration, no GCC country can alone achieve its developmental aspirations or critical security needs or navigate the regional and international challenges that they cannot be protected from. And so I believe the national states is here to stay and it shouldn't be diluted within one entity. However, Gulf countries can retain their independence, but within a an integral Gulf bloc. So when we say in-depth regional integration, no Gulf country can achieve that alone. I believe this is very important. This is not about the discourse of what we should and we shouldn't do. This is not my discourse that countries should do that or this or that, but there are two types of thinking to have a blueprint and say this is the best scenario and this is utopia. But this is not what I'm talking about. There is the utopian ideology, utopian meaning that there is something in reality, something that we have on the ground, but we need to push it further with work. And this type of Tobai or utopian thinking is pivotal. Without it, no political work, be it right wing or left wing, can push reality to what is further than it is right now. This is pivotal in political work. So, what I believe now for that we need a new system, meaning that we shouldn't ignore the GCC as an organization, but we should build on what we have established in 1981. We need to revise it and have in-depth review of it. So we cannot elaborate on the reasons and factors that have brought us to this strategic appraisal related to the internal and regional non-Arab contexts and international transformations ongoing and upcoming in technology, geopolitical issues, demographic issues, and this poses an upcoming opportunity that might be available in the near future. There are multiple facets of this. There's the internal facet or perspective of our immediate needs, and we look at the internal uh, environment of the GCC, and there is the international situation, and there is the Arab Mashreq also framework, which we focus on in my research paper. The main idea that this research paper focuses on with the relation with the Arab Mashreq is the existence of tension that perhaps reaches the level of contradiction in the achievement of major aspirations of GCC countries and the requirements of effective response for unprecedented challenges that have risen in the situation of the Arab Mashriq. So let's be clear. There is tension. I don't know if it reaches contradiction. Maybe you can help me clarify that between the necessities of this development in the GCC countries And this is an existential issue nowadays for GCC countries. It is not a developmental issue in the regular sense because nowadays we have gone into the post oil era. 20 years ago, we said that we will go into the post oil era. Now we have gone into it. We are well into it. And the post oil era doesn't mean that oil is finished or its era has ended. When we say post-industrial societies, doesn't mean that industries have ended, but they are not the main driver of the economy. So nowadays, when we say the post-oil economy, oil cannot with time be the center that emanates the economic process or drives the economic process. So, in this historical moment, when we're aware of it, we need to know that we are in the post oil era and the GCC are vis a vis an existential historical challenge, and overcoming it is a necessity, and the main objective is for these countries to enjoy a dignified life in the post-oil era, in the post-oil economy. So, failing this test is an existential failure, and I couldn't find any other word. It's not a developmental failure only, it is beyond that. And so, this requires dedicating many resources for this objective, and we can be aware of that. There is tension between this aspect and the ability of the GCC countries to have a surplus of power, and by power I mean economic power, political power, and so on and so forth, to respond effectively and not just to respond with sympathy and cooperation. No, effective response to rescue the situation in the Arab Mashreq. So nowadays, when I hear that this is a pivotal moment for GCC countries, this is the time where they need to be leaders, I feel some kind of apprehension, some concern. I believe that wearing such hats or playing such roles, I believe, is reckless for a simple reason, a main reason, which is the fact that the capabilities of these Gulf countries is much less than what is needed for the situation in the Arab Mashreq nowadays. Right now, let's say this honestly, and this is well documented. Actually, we're talking about not we're in some countries we're talking about failed states and the need for building a state. And nowadays there are so many countries in the Mashreq that do not need to build a state. They need to build a nation building, not just state building. And this goes beyond the abilities of any countries acting as singular powers or collective powers to lead the action of root transformations to change these situations. And the Americans have failed in that previously, so it's proven. But the problem is even bigger now because the GCC bloc have these problems. These problems should be in an international framework, but there is a continuous push from Europeans and Americans to consider them regional issues. You are the Gulf people, you know the culture, so you can be in charge of Syria and other issues, or in charge of Yemen. And this is a trap, in my opinion. They are relinquishing their responsibilities on one hand, and on the other hand, they are giving these states responsibilities that are much bigger than what they can shoulder. And the issue here is about tensions that can reach contradiction in the achievement of major aspirations of GCC countries and requirements for effective response for unprecedented challenges in the current situations of the Arab Mashriq. And so the system of GCC countries need to come up with a compound approach that is understood by the Arab Mashriq. We need to have some sort of understanding and not let them fall into the trap of isolating themselves, because this is not the situation. This is historically realistic situation also. So we need to have understanding from the Arab Mashriq, and to go forward in in dedicating energies to achieve major aspirations and effective collective action with the international transformations, and the fact that they have limited powers to make the required change to overcome major and multiple intersecting challenges that are facing the Arab Mashriq. And this is quite unfortunate, and these are expected to continue and be exacerbated in the near future. And this appraisal is based on the following. First, the variation produced by the transformations in 6 decades in the GCC countries, and the Arab Mashreq countries on the other hand. And this creates points, pillars that are different in terms of routes and the type of wagers that they give. So in this, we are in this region, and you look forward, and the pillars of building this post-oil economy, how to build the nation, how to build institutions, how to regain trust in police forces, and so on and so forth. These are different pillars that are completely different when we look into the future. And so, this qualitative differentiation is a major strategy that we cannot ignore in any rational understanding that has a historical awareness of the future relations of the GCC and its relation to the Arab Mashriq. Also, the particularity or specificity of the relations of the GCC countries and its existential nature. And so they need to keep pace with their time in building a contemporary economy that is sustainable, that guarantees dignified life and continuous political entities, with the receding of the economy that is based on oil rentier, which is right now dying. And this transformation in the economic model requires the GCC countries and its governments to enrich the positive spirit, looking forward to the future, and not being dragged to the state of desperation in the Arab Mashriq. And the second thing is the in-depth crises faced by the Arab Mashriq, and which are subject to the Gramsci organic module of challenges. And the organic crisis means that it's not based on one predicament and that we can address and then overcome it. No, it comes from various reasons and causes. And in the Arab Mashriq, there is the situation of the failed states, the vulnerable state, and the state that is subject to crises. So the failed state, the vulnerable state, and the state that is facing crises. And this is the general state, and it's no longer viable to use any other description of these states. What is extra used to be extraordinary has become the prevalent situation now. A state where the Thomas Hobbes literature has become more beneficial to understand the ubiquitous situation and its destiny in terms of development, meaning that there is a dead end in terms of development rather than an ability to approach approach these situations. And connected to that, a situation of a dead end to reach sustainable solutions for extensive crises that have drained the Arab Mashreq, such as the Palestinian cause and the tensions burning out the states in terms of dealing with ethnic religious minorities. This is unfortunate, of course, but it exists and it is exacerbated. And so I conclude with this. The main thing here is that at a time where we shouldn't and we couldn't, as Gulf countries, to isolate ourselves from the reality and crises that are plaguing the Arab Mashreq, but they need not to fall in the delusion of thinking they can lead the attempts to face or confront these crises, and so they need to be cautious from going too far or too deep in their complexities. Many of these crises, in their nature, are challenges that go beyond the capacity of one singular state or a number of states in the region to dismantle their predicaments and dilemmas. Gulf countries, when they are trying to achieve their developmental aspirations, they need to understand and be aware that too many commitments is the fastest way to reaching to a strategic burnout in a phase where they need to dedicate their energy to face or confront the tests of the future awaiting them. So, passing these historic tests is the best they can offer to the Arab Mashriq. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Asad, for this intervention. And I'm sure there will be so much discussion and questions about it later. I move on to the third speaker in this session, which is Khalid bin Abdulaziz Al-Khalifi. Dr. Khalif is a diplomat and an academic specializing in international relations with a focus on small state studies and smart power. He earned his PhD in international relations and political science from the Australian National University. Since 2016, he has held various roles in Qatar's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He also serves as a senior expert at the Center for International Policy Research, and he has lectured on international relations, Gulf studies, security, and international law at Qatar University. Go ahead, you have 15 minutes.
Uh, I have two extra minutes. Dr. Khalid will be presenting on Gulf Main's multilateralism, a new mode of cooperation amid Mashreq Transformation. This is one of the problems in trying to understand the new context, lack of time. Thank you, Dr. Marwan. Thank you to fellow speakers and to you, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Maybe if we understand the minilateralism, there are some problems in understanding the transformations, in understanding international conflicts, and also in understanding the concept of power. Maybe the biggest problem is there is a big context in understanding. I have a big problem in understanding power as soft power only. There are different components for understanding power, and it's okay to combine them, but there is a scientific problem, and that is to create new types of power without providing the basis for understanding them, that rentier powers or whatever. If the formation of this power is not based on a clear scientific definition, then this power can be looked at as somewhat fragile. Joseph Nye, when he talked about soft power, there were some scientific problems, But Joseph Nye did not rely on soft power as part of his advice to the Obama administration, but as a new smart of the foreign policy followed by Obama in 2008. These changes in the international components led to a new understanding of international alliances that the traditional of the alliances within the GCC or the Arab League are no longer prominent as the basic component for solving the disputes which sometimes happen within domestically, if we can call it that. So we're trying to look for a new terminology through which we can understand this new we I see that minilateralism is taking a huge amount of interest in American and European study centers, and scientifically speaking, there was not enough research to understand the academic context or the scientific context of minilateralism. For this reason, terminology is to understand this transformation is there, but it needs some clarification. At the heart of these transformations, minilateralism presents itself as a flexible and resilient way of dealing with things away from the stagnation by traditional. The microphone keeps falling up and down. Now, the Gulf countries, especially Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, have become a new catalyst in this change and pushed them to, and how the transformations push them into forming these new dynamics, which are very effective. First of all, why do we need to understand minilateralism? Because the developments seen in the last decade that the traditional structures like the Arab League have been unable to provide any solutions, and this has become a permanent feature. So, minilateralism has become more practical and more dynamic and more resilient and more flexible to deal with changes. And this is not just a political preference on behalf of these countries, but it's a structural response to these transformations. We see that there is an understanding when in fact we have to review the way we understand the geography of the Arab Mashreq after the fall of the Assad regime and the historic narrative of Syria. Syria has collapsed as a center of gravity, an Arab center of gravity, and became field to many players. Lebanon is until now is going through a political vacuum when sectarian, political, and others. Iraq faces the same problem. We don't know who is within the state, who is outside it. The Palestinian cause is going through the this critical, and in my view, the war on Gaza still continues. For this reason, these regional transformations are incapable of dealing with the situation but provide some way outs, and I'll talk about three cases here. The first example, when we talk about minilateralism and the GCC, the first thing that comes to mind is what is known as the Abraham Accords. The GCC, whether we like it or not, I'll be frank, there are huge problems in its foreign policy. We agree economically and we hold many agreements, but when it comes to when we do this, we do that either through bilateralism or minilateralism when it comes to foreign policy. For this reason, when Trump in his first term and Jared Kushner and when they established the Abraham Accord Center and they're preparing research on an attempt to create or make the GCC normalize with the Zionist entity, the countries who have not normalized yet. Then the Abraham Accord between the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel, and leave the others alone now, and has established a network of cooperation with three or four countries, the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel, and the United States, of course, is the main actor in this agreement. But at the same time, this forms problems to the same reasons why we started the Arab League, the Islamic Cooperation Council, GCC, and because the GCC for long has said we will never normalize with the Zionist entity, and we hear this constantly that we will not accept normalize with Israel. Suddenly, we are surprised that a mini-lateralism example of this comes up and it starts going it alone. The second case, which is maybe more pleasant, and that is the understanding between Saudi Arabia and Qatar regarding Syria and Lebanon too. Regarding Syria, there is a minilateralism which led to accepting Ahmed al-Shara as a legitimate leader who can attend the General Assembly, and lately the uh, abolition of the Caesar law, and which really are restoring Syria as a main factor in international scene. One of the main reasons behind that was the Saudi, Qatari unilateralism, and Turkey, of course. We saw that in the meeting with Donald Trump in Riyadh, and the participation of Erdogan through a video link, and also the role of Saudi Arabia and Qatar to pay the salaries of government employees in Syria, and also in Lebanon. In another case, there is minilateralism, which started with some European countries. France, at the beginning, used to take a leading role. They failed. I think they failed because the GCC have a more prominent role now to deal with the internal problems in Lebanon. And we saw how the Qatar and Saudi Arabia agree on the Lebanese dossier in the coming changes. The third case for minilateralism is the Qatari Egyptian American mediation in Gaza. Maybe this is the clearest example of minilateralism. Three countries has its own feature. Egypt has its security ability to deal with Israel. Qatar has the relationship with Hamas and the confidence building measures, and the United States has the military and political pressure on Israel. And in the absence of any role of the traditional mechanisms, this mediation became the only framework to achieve a humanitarian truce, exchange of prisoners, and opening aid. Even if the Trump plan fails, I think these countries will continue their role in returning to negotiations between the parties. And maybe the minilateralism here is most obvious and most dynamic. The Gulf countries are moving from the traditional role as the political and financial supporter to a more fundamental role to establish something. Some may disagree with this, but there are three pivotal catalysts or incentives. First, the need to some rapid decision making mechanisms because the traditional ones and the old style of blocks does not provide that. Also, to redefine the Gulf power, I think we talked in introductions about that, that there are differences regarding Yemen and Sudan, and maybe we'll have new differences within the GCC, and also when the Gulf countries moving from the peripheries to the center, and the decisions are no longer taken in Damascus and Baghdad, but in Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Doha. Some may disagree with this, but the Quad or Queen, you heard with this kind of these blocks or formations or alliances, Quad and Queen, that this is the quartet, or this is an attempt to break the international, like all the GCC countries and the European countries, to form a new framework or mechanism. And maybe the Quad and Quint provide a definition for minilateralism. What does the rise of minilateralism mean? I think there are four changes. A leadership based of network rather than one prominent leader, like for example Nazaritism, or this is a network of different capitals. They have efforts, joint efforts, or coordinated. Also, functional cooperation according to they're not binding commitments if you do not have the tools to make a success. For example, we cannot ask, for example, the Sultanate of Oman that you're obliged to interfere in the Lebanese dossier when they don't have the tools. So therefore, we break the traditional frameworks of unanimity in the Arab League or the GCC to reach more of forming. Finally, I know this is not a podcast, so I'll not carry on. The rise of minilateralism is not a tactical change. This is a fundamental structural change because the crises have produced this form of collaboration, and the Gulf countries, with the tools they have diplomatically and through their contacts, are reforming the future of the Arab Mashreq, and this will have a deep impact.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid, and we thank all the panelists. And now we will give the opportunity to the attendees to make remarks and questions. We don't have a great deal of time, but we'll try to make the best out of the time that we have. Let's start with Dr. Tafir and then Dr. Zaid. Go ahead, please. If you may, please, just for to give the opportunity to the largest number possible of people, make your interventions as concise as possible. I have a question for the distinguished panelists. I noticed there is pessimism in what Abdullah Shaiji and Dr. Assad talked about, but it was more optimistic with Dr. Khalid and the Arab Gulf. Dr. Abdullah Shaiji talks about the US national security strategy as a bad replacement for the Carter Doctrine 79 or 80, but in reality, it transformed from sponsorship to strategic partnership in the text of the national security strategy of the US, the relationship with the Gulf turned from sponsorship to a strategic partnership in AI, economy, and security. Dr. Anwar considered opening the space for Gulf countries to be part of solution for Arab countries as a trap, and this is also pessimistic. You're saying if you interfere, it's a trap, and if we are neutralized, then this is unacceptable. Okay, go ahead, please. Thank you very much. I thank the panelists and we thank the Arab Center as well. I have some sort of confusion in this regard. Was talking to Prince Hassan bin Talal and he said the Arab Mashreq and the Gulf. And I said, is the Gulf not part of the Arab Mashreq? And believe that in this forum there was some sort of confusion as well. We're talking as if we're not part of the Arab Mashreq when the Gulf is actually part of the Arab Peninsula and part of the Arab Mashreq. This is the first point. And the second point, we are in the context of this inability, as Dr. Abdullah Shaiji said, and the new US vision. We need to have our own vision of given our reality in the GCC as per the minilateralism, as Dr. Khaled said, or as per multilateralism in general to rearrange our issues in the Arab Gulf when it comes to Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Sudan, in order to have a solid bloc that can confront the US and Israel. Otherwise, we are unable to do anything. If we go into any more uh, fragmentation, then we will be in a predicament. And we rely on the Arab Center and the other good think tanks to provide a good vision to revive the concept of pan-Arab vision in this framework. Dr. Majid, Dr. Ahmad as well. And then I will move on to the other side of the room. Thank you. I would like to focus on the four projects going on before the 7th of October in the region. Perhaps the difference between the Trump administration, the national security strategy, and Biden and the Democrats. The Democrats tried to rearrange all the portfolios at odds with Trump, who wanted to deal with each portfolio alone. We have the new national security strategy, the Bahrain meeting, Al Naqab meeting, the picture of the ministers of foreign ministries, new engineering, and the green trade pathway or corridor that was proposed in September 2023 by the US. It is an important trade pathway or route. Also, the issue of alliance, the Abrahamic Accord. There is the other important part, I2U2, which is the Indian, American, UAE, Israeli alliance, which had important horizons regarding soft power and religion. And last but not least, we're talking about a partial agreement between Saudi Arabia and the USA. But there were talks by a new Eisenhower, and all of this creates a void in the region. So there were projects that were ongoing and now they have ended. So what will fill this void now? We need a series of projects that fill this void. Thank you, Doctor. And in the Arab Center, we have issued a research paper about U2I2, which is a very important. The U2I2 Alliance. Thank you, Doctor, and thank you for my colleagues. Dr. Abdullah talked about details, but he didn't touch upon the essence. I disagree with Dr. Asad on the convictions when we talked about the West and the US saying that the oil has no value. It's because they want to impose their agenda, and so they disagree with Saudi Arabia, and they disagree with Saudi Arabia and agree with Russia. So oil is still the main power, the main element of power now. And the GCC, it seems that it's living the state of the League of Arab States, which we were talking about for 10 years now. It is becoming an ineffective umbrella. And so Dr. Khaled talked about this in minilateralism, the issue of minilateralism. So I am saying that the convictions that were imposed upon us in the Gulf regarding the nationalism, the strongholds of conflicts have moved on from the Red Sea and the Arab to the Arab Sea, and so we need to redefine the terminology and study our predicaments with new terminology. Is we need to study Israel as the Israeli situation or condition, which is our main concern in the current situation. We'll give the floor to Dr. Abdel Nabi and then Dr. Mariam and Dr. Haider, of course. I'll get back to you. Good morning. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you to the panelists who have spoken and with their important research papers. What I want to say is things that they have mentioned, but I would like to reaffirm. The first part is to what extent can we talk about a Gulf policy? This variation or fragmentation in these multiple stances of Gulf countries that sometimes reach contradiction regarding Arab portfolios. So we cannot talk about a unified Gulf policy right now at this moment, at least. And I think this is a pivotal issue when we talk about the growing role of the Gulf. We cannot turn a blind eye to this issue. And this is one point. The other point is we need to be aware that this growing role of the Gulf is related to international factors. The main major international actors, such as the USA, want the Gulf countries to play this role in some files. And there are many examples of that, but we need to avoid extravagance in this role. This is a Gulf era, and the decision is mainly in this Gulf region. And the panelists talked about this because no matter how much power we have in the Gulf, we cannot compare that to major countries, even if their powers are receding in terms of the demographic weight, the depth, the traditions of the political ecosystem. They are more instilled in these communities. We are indigenous people of this region. We are proud of its role and we are aware of the positive transformations that have taken place, but we shouldn't have extravagance or overestimate this role or say that it is a pivotal role. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdel Nabi. Thank you to the panelists, the three panelists. And my question is, if the GCC is to have a role to resolve crises of the Arab Mashreq. In light of these variations, can we talk about one strategy? And second, is the GCC or the Arab role absolute? Can it deal with all the crises of the Arab Mashreq, or is there another trend or another force, which is the USA and the USA-Israeli alliance, who have when they have a project, and this project is the Grand Israel, and it's being achieved in Lebanon, Syria, and so on and so forth, and in the occupied territories as well. And there is also a partner project for Israel to become the major or the greatest power in the region, practicing its policies and its influence on all, impose it on all policies in the Arab Mashreq. So, will the GCC have a role in being a part of that Israeli project, or confront that project and have their own force and be capable of influencing the Arab Mashriq? That is my question. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please, Doctor. Peace and God's mercy be upon you. I would have loved for Dr. Al-Anoud's speech to be a research paper. I didn't understand from Dr. Abdullah or Dr. Asad what they mean by transformation. When do we call it transformation? What Dr. Mehi said today, he described what happened in Syria as an earthquake. When do we call this era transformational, when they are only projects and responses, improvised responses, as Trump said when he turned his Department of Defense into a Department of War? And so minilateralism is, or multilateralism is based on common interests, and you were gentle when you didn't say that they are based on common concerns. Thank you very much for the panelists for their interventions. I have a comment on Dr. Abdullah's paper. I believe that he expresses a voice in the Gulf states, specifically in Qatar, regarding the future of the military relations and the protection relations with the USA. In the few days after the Israeli strike against Doha, we published an essay in the Arab Center saying that Doha was exposed to two aggressions, and while being in this military relations and the US, and it asked the question, what is the point of this relation? Dr. Abdullah wanted to put the foundations for this idea with regarding the relations with the USA, and I disagree that the US base plays a role in that. I believe that Trump returned the Gulf into a central role in the US policy. I disagree. I I apologize. There's something wrong with the sound. The microphone's not working. Since the George Bush Jr. era on the repercussions of 9/11, and you know the policy of Trump and Biden inherited that. Who the person who returned this relation, as Dr. Dafiri said in different words, after 25 years, is Trump. And just 30 seconds, please. I believe that in light of the transformation, we are heading towards a partnership, and there is no soft power, there is hard power after the Israeli atrocities in these 2 years. The hard power will be central question for the Gulf countries, and not just in relation to the armament race. I believe we need to have hard power. Thank you very much. I would like to apologize. I cannot take questions from everyone because we have already gone beyond the time allotted to the session. I'll just take two questions from the gentleman in the middle and Dr. Youssef. Thank you for the panelists. I agree with Dr. Asad and Dr. Abdullah, but I have one comment the mother and father left the home for an emergency, and they left the biggest sister to make it 1,000 piece puzzle. When the parents came in the evening, they deconstructed the puzzle for another occasion. So after the Trump administration, are we going to reassemble the puzzle with our oldest sister, or in new eras we will have a new forum to talk about how we will deal with our other US administrations? Thank you, Dr. Marwan. Thank you for the panelists for their distinguished interventions. My question is about the Gulf project, and it seems everyone agrees that Gulf is running behind events. It's all reactive and transactional. So, what are the traits of this project for it to be successful? Because it was never successful before. Uh, what are the features that the region needs with the growing challenges and the different changes every day? What are the features and how do we find the solutions? I apologize to the others for not taking your questions, but perhaps we can talk about them in the other sessions. I'll give 3 minutes to the speakers. We don't have to answer all the questions because some of the questions were a bit rhetorical. So I will start with Dr. Khaled if you have any comments, and then Dr. Asad, and we will end with Dr. Abdullah Shaiji. 3 minutes. A common Gulf orientation. When Israel bombed Doha, other Gulf countries were talking about self-discipline. What self-discipline are you talking about? And when the Saudi statement was issued, they rescinded the other statements. We are 6 countries and we cannot agree on one decision. Also, this flirtation with the terminology, this was said to me by a professor in New York. If you become the puppet here to the terminology, you will become the puppet. So the questions about interests and concerns, if they are common concerns, then they will lead to common interests. If the problem is to call them concerns because they are small states, I don't believe that makes sense. Maybe we can take it from a different theoretical framework. Interest is more accurate if we talk about it rationally or realistically. And I'm talking here realistically here, and I will conclude here. Thank you. I will not be able to answer all the questions, so I will just speak in general, starting with what was said by Dr. Zaid regarding the Middle East and the Arab Mashreq. As per my understanding, this is a geopolitical, historical categorization of things. The word Arab Mashriq was coined in the 20th century. This wasn't a term before, and it was for British strategic needs. And by it, they meant the Middle East, the area between London and India, east of London, and in the middle of that area. And then the term became prevalent, and it departed from its geographic reference. Sometimes they even call the west of Japan Middle East. So when we talk about the centrality, the center and the periphery. There is no center and periphery by themselves. This is from a perspective. From a perspective, this is a center and this is a periphery. And the idea of the center and the periphery in a certain era, the center and the periphery as perceived by the center of power interested in this region, which was the Europe, the region of Europe. Now it's more than that. It's Europe, America, and Asia. And so there is a certain historic era that is correct. When you look at the region, you would say this is the center and this is the periphery. And let me give you an example. Anyone who studied the Middle East studies and postgraduate studies knows about this. There is a book by Albert Horani, a historian and a great intellect. He is a traditionalist, but he is a great intellect as well. Arabic Thought in the Liberal Age. I believe it was translated from 1789, the beginning of the contemporary age with Napoleon's invasion of Egypt and the end of liberalism. So when we read this book, and I told you this book is a reference, you will find the main focus on Egypt and the Levant. You will not find anything about the Gulf and the Arab Peninsula. There are certain references, small references, but is this shortcoming in this great person, this great intellect? No, but this is the focus and interest of his audience at that time. This centrality, the idea of centrality and the periphery there, has been displaced with the oil boom and what was produced by it. So there was displacement in interests in the region. There is more interest that moved from Egypt and the Levant to this region because of oil and what oil produces, including investment opportunities. And this was embodied in the Cartier doctrine and the Gulf, and which is related to the liberation of Kuwait. So clearly, we are talking about the displacement of the center from outside, from this region into the Gulf region. Today, this displacement has been achieved completely, and one of the mistakes was talking about pivoting to Asia. Yes, the Americans do not want the Arab Mashreq, but they've been focusing their efforts in the Gulf. This is an opportunity and a burden, but this is a different discussion. Something else I'll speak quickly. The issue of pessimism and talking about solutions. It depends on what do you mean by a solution. Is a solution diplomatic intervention and settlements among parties? That's excellent, and that is our duty. But when we talk about other things, when we talk about what is happening in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Sudan, Yemen. People are talking about reconstructing these states and the states that are convening and talking about that. They're saying that this is your responsibility as the Gulf. For example, in Lebanon, or in the USA, they're cutting down their aid. Their foreign aid is are over and done with. And so they're saying that the Gulf is the center, you are the main party here, and so you need to lead this process. I have no problem with diplomatic mediation. There's no problem with that. It's excellent work. And if reconstruction of Lebanon requires $10 billion, but when you're saying 100 billion or more than that, I stop here because there are needs within this region that are priorities. Gulf states nowadays, most governments are in a deficit, a budget deficit. They have a deficit and they are in debt. So there is a reputation that we are rich, and this is what I mean about regarding the imposition of roles. We need to be cautious here when it comes to leadership and pioneering role. Leading what and pioneering what? If it's rescuing a country that is a failed state, then this is quite costly, and we don't have enough experience to deal with it and to confront it. We need to confront our limitations. Let me give you an example. In Yemen, there was a group called Friends of Yemen. This was in the era of Ali Saleh, was led by Saudi Arabia and Britain, because they said if Yemen is left by itself, and then it will be a failed state. And so this group included 30 countries, Friends of Yemen. This was in 2004 or 2003. And even that failed. And now if you gather people and you say to Denmark, pay, Netherlands, pay, and we want to do this in Gaza, we want to do that in Lebanon, you will not find any party who's willing to act. So I know, I believe this is a moral role, but within the limitations of your capabilities and the priorities. One last question that I would like to answer regarding the GCC. I believe, I understand this. There's a resentment from the role of the GCC. I'm not talking about the GCC in its current state. This is a complete reconstruction that goes in parallel with the requirements of the future. And the requirements of the future include that the weakness of international reference and international law. When you have a weak international reference, what do you need? Aggregation of power. You need to aggregate powers in order to live in this world. I do not know how any Gulf country can confront this world without that. When we talk about AI, look at the logic of AI. AI cannot succeed, and the Gulf countries are investing in it, but you cannot work in silos in AI and excel in it. You need to work with others. You need integration. You need such aggregation. And so, this aggregation, even in economics today, this difference between the economies of the GCC and the Arab Mashreq is huge. So you cannot even have a shared Arab market. There are technical prerequisites for such a market. Nowadays, they are not possible anymore. And the first of them is digitization. I conclude here, but one last point. I am not talking about transformations. The word that I use is trends, trends that are upcoming. And I found out that the Arabic language complex in Cairo said that the word trend needs to be coined in the Arabic language, needs to be introduced in the Arabic language, because we don't have an equivalent of it in Arabic. So there are trends in the world. There are trends including divisions, economic divisions, and we need to have blocks. The recession of globalization opens opportunity for acclimating to these conditions. I believe we've taken the time allotted for the break, and we've gone into the time allotted for the next session. I'll take the same time that was taken by Dr. Asad. Food for thought is more important than food for our stomachs. Dr. Haidar and Dr. Hassan, I believe, talked about the fact that I did not discuss the essence of things. First, I would like to clarify and add to what Dr. Assad said, that the popularized Middle East, coined by Alfred Mahan in 1902, which was taken by the British Empire, and the U.S. Department of State. They do not call our region the Middle East; they call it the Near East. And as for the questions in the beginning, we shouldn't put the responsibility on the GCC or for the failed states and the conflicts, the differences, and the Arab states crises. The GCC has found itself as a de facto leader of the region, because you don't have a central power. In strategic studies, we talk about the heart and the periphery, and the heart has become a periphery and the periphery has become the heart. And the transformations discussed by the doctor, as Dr. Asad said, they are imposing themselves on us without us being able to deal with them, because there are no anchors. Even with the GCC countries, they have no capabilities of playing all this role, especially with challenges from state actors and non-state actors. I would have loved to have more time to go into details. However, unfortunately, we are limited when it comes to time. For those who believe that the US deems us as a strategic ally, you are delusional. The US does not perceive us as a strategic ally. We are just a transactional ally, especially with the Trump administration, who is quite clear in his public embarrassing statements, or when it comes to Biden and other Democrats Democrats or Republicans, the strategic ally does not threaten the security of their allies, does not impose their opinions on these allies, does not give Saudi Arabia F-35 downgraded and Israel upgraded, doesn't have policies that threaten their securities and their visions 2030 in Saudi Arabia, 2030 in Qatar, and other visions in Kuwait and Oman. We are not on the same page. We will not be on the same page with the USA because USA does not perceive us as an ally with the same weight of Israel. They allow Israel to do whatever they want and undermine the Arab order and the Gulf order. What kind of strategic ally is that? Yes, they want to have trade deals. That is correct, but we will be always be struggling with the same issues with them. And when it comes to alliances, there are variations. For example, Hungary is doing something that is at odds with the other counterparts, and the same goes for the Gulf region. We do not have a unified vision on anything. This is what we're always saying. Bahrain and the UAE have gone against the Arab initiative, which was Saudi led to have relations, when having relations with Israel. This goes against the Arab summit in 2002, which led to the complete withdrawal, where the Saudi crown prince, who used to be Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz, and it was an Arab initiative. It was the first time the Arabs agreed on something, complete withdrawal, and no normalization. We who opened embassies in Syria before anyone else. So this is a structural issue with alliances. You cannot agree on the on anything but the bare minimum, and the bare minimum cannot make you an influential country. And so we shouldn't impose too many responsibilities on the GCC. It is a de facto leader, but it cannot do much with the blatant attack by Israel. $24 billion were given to Israel by Trump. While we have 42 million Americans that are in hunger right now, that are poor. So do not depend on Trump. Those who depend on Trump have no brain. The Carter Doctrine was used by Bush in liberating Kuwait and was used by Reagan in protecting the Kuwaiti oil tankers in the Ernest Well, which led to ending the Iraqi Kuwaiti war 1 year after the protection of the Kuwaiti oil tankers. So the Trump doctrine completely eradicates the Carter doctrine and leaves their Gulf allies on their own. So we haven't done the homework with these challenges that we need to deal with ourselves. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdullah. Thank you to all the panelists and to the attendees. The forum will be split into two themes now. Here we will talk about transformation. Social media discussions will take place in Auditorium 2. We will take